Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on resource resilience, moving from linear to circular resource management, organized jointly by the Singapore International Water Week and Black Veatch. My name is Ryan Yun, and I'm the Managing Director of the SIWW. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are appreciative of your strong support and interest, and based on our registration numbers, we have over 800 signups for today's webinar. This week carries a special significance to SIWW. Earlier in the year, due to COVID-19, we took the difficult decision to reschedule SIWW to next June. Had that not been the case, SIWW would actually be taking place right now, on this very week. So since we are unable to welcome you physically to Singapore, we thought, why don't we bring our content to you instead? And that is why we decided to launch our SIWW webinar series. So this week marks the start of a year-long series of webinars that we will be curating with our partners. These webinars will focus on key thematic areas of importance to the international water community. Yesterday, we successfully organized a webinar on urban coastal resilience. Today, we are organizing the second webinar on resource resilience. And moving forward, you can look forward to more webinars on other topics such as digital water. We are delighted to be co-organizing this webinar with Black Veatch, our strong partner for many years. And I hope you will have an enjoyable time learning from the panel of experts that we have lined up for you today. Just a gentle reminder that to all participants that recording of this webinar is forbidden. We will be making, we will be making a recorded version of this webinar available on our social media channels later on. So before I invite the experts to share their perspectives, I would first like to conduct a simple interactive activity with everybody who is tuning in today. And through this activity, we would like to find out your views on circular resource management and resource resilience. So you will see on the screen in front of you on the right-hand side, there is a URL. I would like to invite everybody to take out your mobile devices, open up your web browser and key in the URL siww.sparkup.live. We will be using the SparkUp application for the interactive segment as well as the Q&A function later on. So once again, please take out your mobile devices, key in the URL siww.sparkup.live. Once you're on that web page, key in the event code WYHYI and join as a new visitor. Once you have done that, you will come to this home page where you would see welcome to the session resource resilience, right? I will give you 10 seconds to do that. Again, please join us on the platform, SparkUp platform at siww.sparkup.live, key in the event code and join as a new visitor. You will end up in this page. So once you are here, we will run 3 activities that we would like you to participate. I will launch the first activity now, which is a word cloud. You would see a pop-up appearing right now. Click join. And in this activity, we want to ask participants, what comes to your mind when we talk about resource resilience and circular economy? I invite you to key in any word or phrases that comes to your mind. So click a new word. If you want to insert a phrase, you can insert a phrase with no spacing in between or insert a dash in between to indicate a phrase. So once the words come out, you would see the words listing on the mobile phone. If there is a particular phrase or word that you like, click on the heart shape beside it to like that phrase. And all the words that have been inserted would now be appearing on your screen in front of you. The size of the word shows the number of votes the word has obtained from participants who are here together with us today. So please feel free to key in the words, browse through the words that have been inserted and like as many as you think as you like, right? And as you can see on the screen right now, we have about 10 to 12, 15 words. Some of them are bigger in sizes. Obviously, sustainability is getting a lot of votes, followed by conservation, green economy, no waste. Yes, please continue to join us. For those who are joining us late, join us at sparkup.live and key in the event code and participate in this activity. I will just take another 10 seconds to just wrap this up. So if you have not voted, please join us. Vote for the favorite word or phrase that comes to your mind when we talk about resource resilience and circular economy. Okay, 5 more seconds, please. 3, 2, 1, and I will close off this activity. All right, so this is the word cloud that has been generated from everybody's participation. Thank you so much. If you would like to take a screenshot and post it on social media, by all means do it, and hashtag it to SIWW webinar or SIWW 2021. All right, so that is the word cloud that everybody has contributed. You can see some of the words mentioned there: sustainability, conservation, closing the waste loop, environment, green economy. So yes, thank you. Let's move on to the next activity. The next activity is actually a poll. It has just popped up on your screen here. Click join. And in this activity, we are asking you to vote. What are the critical factors you think would successfully implement circular resource management? There are 8 options. They are shown on the screen. Click any 3 that you think ranks the highest in your opinion, which are the critical factors that will allow us to successfully implement circular resource management. As you can see on the screen right now, technology and innovation is ranked the highest, followed by education and changing mindset, followed by partnerships with industry and related sectors. Enabling regulation and policy seems to be a close third as well. So thank you very much for all your contributions. I think we will take another 10 seconds just to allow those who have not voted to do so. Okay, 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. We will close off this exercise. Thank you so much. So just to recap, based on everybody's participation, technology and innovation ranks the highest, followed by education and changing mindset. Thirdly, enabling regulations and policies, and finally, partnerships with industries and related sectors. So later on during the panel discussion, the panel will address some of these factors as part of their discussions later on. Thank you. So let's go on to the last activity very quickly, which again has popped up in your screen right now. Click join. So in this activity, we want to know, in your opinion, what are the most pressing issues facing the industry today? The water industry, wastewater industry, and stormwater industry. Again, vote any 3 that comes to your mind. Now let's take 30 seconds to do that. For those who have just joined us, we are conducting an interactive activity right now using our SparkUp application. You can see at the bottom of the screen, join us on the web browser by entering siww.sparkup.live and enter the event code WYHYI. Okay, so let us take another 5 seconds before we wrap this up. 3, 2, 1, we will end off this activity. So based on the votes that have been received by everybody, integrated water planning seems to be the factor or the issue that everybody feels is the most pressing, followed by aging infrastructure, systems resilience against external shocks, and finally, data collection and management. So with that, thank you so much for your participation. That sets the scene for the webinar that will be taking place today. So to kick off our webinar today, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker and moderator, Cindy Wallis-Lage. Cindy is no stranger to most of us working in the water sector. She is the president of Black Veatch's water business and a global champion of the world's water resources. Recognized among the top 25 global water leaders, She leads more than 2,800 professionals in more than 75 Black Veatch offices around the world. So Cindy will be setting the framework and context for this very complex issue on resource resilience and the circular economy. After her presentation, she will then be moderating the discussions with our panelists. We will be opening up the Q&A function in the SparkUp app during the panel segment later, and we invite every one of you to lodge your questions if you have one through the app. You may also view other questions that have been posted and vote on the question that you would like to be answered. So with that, I will invite Cindy to deliver her presentation and then to thereafter conduct the panel discussion. Cindy, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. I am delighted to moderate this fantastic panel. It's very exciting to pull this together. I wish we were all in Singapore, but I am pleased to be able to participate with you today. So before I make introductions to the panel, I do want to do a little bit of setting the stage and talk about really what's behind this conversation. So our focus today is on being resilient. Strategic resilience, financial resilience, operational resilience, all matter, but the critical first step is strategy and developing a roadmap that creates the opportunity for us to have financial and operational resilience. Next. A few years ago, GWI mapped the water challenges to the global megatrends and identifying those megatrends that continue to hold today as issues for our communities around the globe, and then seeing those water challenges, put then the drivers in place to set the strategies to deal with circular resource management. They provide that foundation of why it matters. When we look at the water challenges, energy, water quality, aging infrastructure, all of that leading us to make sure that we're thinking in a circular fashion. Next, the top of mind is water supply, quality, and energy. And in this 2018 North America survey of 109 US utilities and 17 Canadian utilities, what you can see is 72% of the effluent was disposed to surface water versus a beneficial reuse to the environment, or having reuse be an opportunity to reuse that water. So when we look at opportunities to improve in our water cycle, tremendous opportunities to be able to reuse effluent as opposed to disposing. Next. With respect to energy, our use is significant, both in its consumption, but also in greenhouse gas production. And in the same 2018 report that I referenced earlier, energy was looked at and looking at the variation and how much is being utilized by various utilities. And there was a very broad range of use from 1 kilowatt to 6 kilowatts per 1,000 gallons. And this is an amazing amount of variation that shows that we have a lot of opportunity for us to drive greater efficiency. And we also have a lot of opportunity for us to reduce greenhouse gases. So next, please. Water and energy alone give us a reason to transform to a water circular economy. But we have even greater opportunities to influence our communities when we look at resource recovery with nutrients, with biosolids management. The key is that we have to break the linear thinking and transform to circular thinking. We need to move away from thinking of waste to only thinking of resource, and give us the opportunity to see so many opportunities for us to bring in a circular mindset. Next, please. In the Black Veatch 2020 Strategic Directions Water Report that we have been doing for the last 7-8 years, this year we talked about the circular economy. And we asked how familiar utilities were with the term circular economy. And only 41% had some familiarity, but interestingly, only 6% were very familiar with the circular economy. That gives us tremendous opportunity to gain value with circular resource management. And I appreciated the word cloud earlier when we were asking about what comes to mind, and seeing the word sustainability, zero waste, conservation, and reuse. Next slide. Because as you can see, when we asked in our report what was the most impactful circular economy techniques, it came down to water efficiency, but then also reuse. So really driving to that mindset of not wasting a drop, but rather seeing how we can utilize every drop. Next. But least we think that circular economy is a solo act, it's important to remember that it takes a community for us to focus on circular economy. We need to include thoughts around the supply side. We need to consider the waste side. And we really must have the consumer's engagement to be a part of our journey to allow us to make the greatest benefits into our communities. Next. And finally, it's important to find the bridge that takes us from setting an agenda, developing the strategy, to then implementing. And the results shown here identify that with large utilities, many have the vision and they have the plan for circular resource management, but less than 50% have fully implemented their strategies. Again, giving us a tremendous opportunity for us to maximize the full water cycle value. So this just to set the stage. Now, today, we have the luxury of hearing from a very, very outstanding panel, and I'm going to give some introductions so that they can then talk to us about their journey and success in the circular resource management. So I'm going to start out with Renee Almendras, who is the president and CEO for Manila Water Company, and he concurrently serves as the senior managing director of Ayala Corporation and is president and chief executive officer for AC Infrastructure Holdings. So very busy man. In 2011, he was recognized by the World Economic Forum as Sustainability Champion for his efforts as president of Manila Water. And during his time as president, the company was recognized as one of the best managed companies in Asia, best in corporate governance, one of the greenest companies in the Philippines, and hailed as the world's most efficient water company. So welcome, Renee, and we look forward to hearing your story.
Thank you.
We also have Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, who's the CEO for Clean Water Services, which is a water resources management utility serving 615,000 customers in urban Washington County, Oregon, and the Tualatin River watershed. Clean Water Services is part of the leading utilities of the world network, and as a utility, has been an innovator in environmental sustainability, water resources management, research and development of new technology and digital solutions. Clean Water Services generates 40% of its own energy and annually recovers 755 tons of phosphorus. Other innovations include the Fernhill Natural Treatment System, which demonstrates water reuse from the perspective of ecological restoration, and the Pure Water Brew Challenge, a partnership with Oregon Brew Crew. So welcome, Diane, and we can't wait to hear about your circular resource management strategies.
Thank you, Cindy.
Our third panelist is Dr. Peng-Chi Meng, who works with PUB, a leading utility in the world, and he is the Chief Engineering and Technology Officer and administers the PUB's R&D program for the development and application of new water technologies in the entire water cycle. Chi Meng was previously the director of the Industry Development Department. He led a team to formulate and implement strategies to grow the Singapore water industry and facilitate commercialization of new water technologies. He also has experience in used water treatment and water policy development, having served as the general manager of the Jurong Water Reclamation Plant and senior assistant director of the Water Policy Division of Singapore's Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources. So Chi Meng, very happy to have you here and share the Singapore story.
Thanks, Cindy.
So we're going to get started because we all want to hear from all of you. And so our first question is really referencing the last slide that I shared with you, which is that 9 out of 10 large utilities say that they have a clear vision and goals to becoming more sustainable. And so my question, and we'll start with Renee, is do you feel your organization has a clear roadmap to a sustainable future? If you could give us some insights of the how and why you set out on your journey and any barriers that you'd like to identify.
Thank you, Cindy. I think I'd start by saying that these days it's very hard to say you have a very clear direction, right? I mean, we need to be agile and nimble. Manila Water started in my first stint as president of Manila Water. Our first sustainability report was 2005. Before that, we were on triple bottom line. We finally got our sustainability report certified by JR in 2012. It has not been a smooth ride. There have been victories, there have been failures. And we thought we were going in a certain direction. We didn't even know we were on our way to this circular economy. All we knew was we wanted to save cost, we wanted to save the environment. And so we had an understanding of where we wanted to go. But yes, we think we know we are moving in a general direction, but as to real details, it's pretty hard to do that. Now, according to challenges, as I said, there have been victories, there have been failures. One of our greatest learnings, and painful learnings at that, is, as you said earlier, you cannot be alone in this journey. Whether it's regulator, government, national government, local government, civil society, even the church gets involved when it comes to certain issues. What we've learned is stakeholders are very, very important. Once upon a time, we said we need stakeholder management, only to realize you cannot manage your stakeholders. So we now have a group called stakeholder engagement. What's the difference? We engage them. They must see value in what they will bring to the table. They must see value in what they will get out of it. Otherwise, they're not going to be supportive. They're not going to be there for you. So on the second point about the challenge, I think it's really about stakeholder engagement. We think it's not a science. It's a combination of science and art. It's a combination of finance, technology, and sometimes even religion of sorts. But the idea is, in this journey towards that circular economy, we believe the biggest challenge for us will be stakeholder engagement. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much. Diane, love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Thanks, Cindy, and thank you to SIWW for hosting this great, interesting convening. So at Clean Water Services, we've been on this journey for about 16 years now. So our strategic approach has been really focused on watershed-based approaches. And we started this journey 16 years ago by really focusing on how we can merge water quality needs, so therefore investments and regulatory compliance through strategies at the treatment plant, augmenting that with the resource recovery mindset. But even more so, it's our focus on resource recovery as it relates to directing investments directly on the watershed itself, and we'll talk about that later. So there's two philosophies that really drives sort of the DNA of Clean Water Services. And the first mindset and strategy is one that is, what is Mother Nature telling us she would have us do? And the second is, what value propositions can we create as a business for the region that we serve? And it's really the merging of this philosophy with actions that are practical, pragmatic, and proactive for the environment that's helped us to embrace the circular economy and a circular resources management outcome. So three areas that we're really focused in on is resource recovery. So energy, nutrients, carbon, and water. From our used water. And the second is to create transformative partnerships, because we do know that one entity cannot do this alone, and it's about working together in a different way. At Clean Water Services, we see ourselves as catalysts and facilitators of conversations and as well as collective actions that benefit our water resources. So our third area of focus is really about regenerating natural systems through biodiversity and through improvements to tree and shrub canopy, and we'll talk more about those strategies as it relates to the environment. But for us, this way of thinking really embraces the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and how do you put it all together? And really, what our aspiration at Clean Water Services is to create elegant water solutions that leverages science and technology and the power of Mother Nature to create us on the sustainable pathway that we need to get on. And some of the challenges really, we've been doing this for 16 years, so I would say we have lots of scar tissue of what worked and what work and how you can get your public engaged and your elected officials to want to invest in these strategies. So I'm happy to share the 16 years of challenges that we've had and offer some creative solutions. But I think within Oregon, where we work, the land is an incredibly important component of what we do, as well as the water resource itself. So I feel very lucky and fortunate to live in Oregon, but it's a great place to really bring the sustainable and resilient solutions together. Thanks, Cindy.
Awesome, great comments. Both of those are great stories. And Chimeng, we'd like to hear Singapore's story.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Cindy. Hi, hello, everybody. So I'm Chimeng from PUB. So maybe as a start off, briefly, so PUB, what PUB does in Singapore is that we are the National Water Authority and we manage water in an integrated loop. So by this, we mean that we collect every drop of rain that falls onto our ground, onto our land. Subsequently, we treat this rainwater for drinking purposes and we send it to our consumers. So subsequently, we also collect the wastewater that's produced and then we retreat it and produce a high grade in recycled water, which we call new water, and send it again for reuse. So I think for more than 10 to 15 years, we have been practicing large-scale water reuse. And I guess this can be construed as an early form of circular economy for water. Of course, this didn't happen by chance. And the main reason why we embark on large-scale water reuse is because we have an existential threat related to water scarcity. So being a small island state, Singapore has a lot of rain, 2.4 meters every year. Unfortunately, we do not have the land to capture all this water for our use. So in place of rain, we have developed a 3-point strategy to help us with our water sustainability. First, we try to maximize what we can collect from the rain by converting as much of our land area as possible to water catchment areas. So today, 2/3 of Singapore land area is water catchment. We also introduce judicious land use control such that we are able to keep the water relatively clean, such that we can be used for potable water applications. The second important strategy, of course, is to try to reuse water endlessly. So this is an important point because if we are able to harness and collect every drop of water to use it over and over and over again, this will allow us to achieve the multiplying effect for water. And as a result, we will allow us to have greater amount of water resources that transcends our physical boundaries of space constraints. And finally, of course, the third strategy is to desalinate more seawater. So Singapore being an island surrounded by sea, going to the sea to produce fresh water is a natural choice. So this 3-point strategy of capturing every drop, reusing water endlessly, as well as desalinating more seawater would be sort of our roadmap towards water sustainability. So I must say that we have some moderate success in doing this. And I think the next focus will be to look at the materials loop within this particular water cycle. So then this becomes more complex because now we are dealing with wastewater sludge. We're dealing with the chemical sludge from our waterworks. So then how then do we have to engage the various stakeholders to want to take up these particular sludges and reuse them and view them not as waste, but actually a valuable resource? And I think I do agree with the two panelists, Renee and Diane, that stakeholder engagement is an important facet to really move this part of the puzzle. Unfortunately, the concept for circular economy has adopted a new life in Singapore because earlier last year, the Singapore Ministry of Environment and Water Resources has folded 3 public sector agencies under its wing. PUB is one of them, of course. Next is the National Environment Agency, which is in charge of food, which is in charge of energy and waste-related issues. The third one is the Singapore Food Agency, which is actually in charge of food production and food safety. So what this means is that all of a sudden, there's a central mandate for these 3 agencies to work together to realize the synergies that can be reaped from the food, energy, water, and waste nexus. So what this means is that we are now looking at ourselves collaborating in ways that we didn't think of a few years ago, be it trying to recover nutrients from our waste products such that it can be used for food production or co-location of facilities to realize all the synergies that we can have in our materials, energy, and water loops within this infrastructure. So yes, so this is roughly what we have to share at this point.
So I'd like to build on your comments because you really were talking about these new partnerships. And if you think about that, can you give some examples, either concepts or technologies where you have piloted and then being able to bring to full operation that really helps give some examples to our audience of how we can actually implement the full circular resource management?
Okay, perhaps one of the more successful projects that we have undertaken is the co-digestion of food waste. So as I mentioned earlier, PUB is in charge of water treatment, so we have a ready supply of sewage sludge. There is also the National Environment Agency, which is in charge of waste management. So under its wing, a major waste stream is the food waste stream source. It is one of our second largest waste stream, and it has a terribly low recycling rate of about 16% compared to the national average recycling rate of 16%. So at a point in time, the food waste is being sent for incineration. It is not a very efficient way of converting food waste, of treating of food waste, because it has actually a high moisture content, which lowers its calorific value. And so back in 2017, the National Environment Agency, NEA, and PUB came together to try to pilot this concept of a co-digestion of food waste together with our sewage sludge. So amazingly, this synergistic blending of these two waste streams actually produce a synergistic effect that allows us to produce 40% more biogas compared to individual waste, these two waste streams alone. So with this particular success, actually it has led on to greater collaboration in our upcoming important facility known as the TWAS Nexus. We are implementing this particular co-digestion process in a large scale. For those of you who are not familiar with the TWAS Nexus, it is actually two important pieces of infrastructure for Singapore. First is PUB's TWAS water reclamation plant that is treating wastewater from the whole western part of Singapore and converting it into new water. The other is NEA's integrated waste management facility, which processes solid waste, and it has a series of recycling and materials handling facility within it before it is sent for waste to energy treatment. So by co-locating these two facilities together, we are able to see that we have quite a lot of synergies. So for example, besides boosting biogas production, we are able to leverage on larger scales incineration facilities to improve the efficiency of incinerating our sewage sludge such that to produce more energy. We are able to reuse processed water streams between the two facilities such that the wastewater from the IWMF is sent to PUB for treatment and things like that. So there are many ways for us to close the materials, energy, and waste loops by just tweaking our thinking and slightly expanding our mandate beyond our current confines and collaborating with the stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you. And I agree that DTSS and the IWMF projects are fantastic projects to show how they can co-locate small footprint and really be able to capitalize on resource recovery. So great project. Diane, you have so many examples you can choose from. We'd love to hear from you on some of the things that you guys have achieved, and whether it's through the pilot stage and all the way to operation, or wherever you might want to choose in between.
Great, thank you. You know, it's really, the approach is, this is a journey, it's not an end destination. So it's really about how can we go from pilot to scale, and then how do we synergize and amplify the partnerships that are needed to be able to go to scale. And that's a common theme on all of the things that we've invested in. So for example, we wanted to attain zero energy for the treatment facilities. We're on our journey. We're about 45% of the way there. And one of the first things we wanted to do was to partner with the folks that are pumping the fats, oils, and grease out of grease interceptors to protect the conveyance system. So instead of taking them away to a landfill, we asked them to bring their fog to our treatment facility. So that's really helped to boost our ability to create power. So we're at 45% of our electrical needs, and it's really offset 70% of our natural gas that's needed for heating of the digestion facility. We're continuing to work on this strategy to get to net zero. It's really somewhat setting some audacious goals and then making the journey to get there year after year. A second way is we needed to figure out how to amplify our biological nutrient removal for phosphorus removal, and we were short of volatile fatty acids. So we partnered with the spent sugar waste folks, you know, Coca-Cola, wine, beer, those types of things, where instead of putting it into the conveyance system, we actually had them truck it to our fermenters to really give that volatile fatty acid boost that we needed. Again, it was finding different ways to work with people in non-traditional ways. When we needed to get to our effluent require of 0.1 milligrams per liter in our effluent, at first we did it with alum, but we knew chemical sludges was not the way to go. So we got into biological phosphorus removal. And all along, we've been trying to stabilize phosphorus removal. We actually found through the team's research a secret for clean water services in which to stabilize the biological population. So this year's the first year that we're going to be able to turn the alum off. And part of it was to do some proof with our regulatory compliance folks that we could actually go from 0.1 to 0.3 and actually benefit the river by not putting aluminum into the river. So as part of BNR, the reason we're doing this is we recovered the struvite out of the system as part of the phosphorus removal strategy. So in that case, we partnered with Ostera to be able to augment our ability to be able to really help this technology move forward in the water industry. But even more so, we developed a way to enhance struvite recovery through our WAS strip intellectual property. So by partnering in this non-traditional way through our nonprofit entity called the Clean Water Institute, we are able to bring more of that technology and support to the industry. So we create 780 tons a year of struvite recovery, and we actually have our own retail fertilizer called Clean Water Grow that we sell locally, and maybe one day we can sell more broadly. But another area that's really important to us is creating these transformative partnerships. I talked about our partnership with Ostera. Our next hunt is to give Mother Nature a voice that we can actually hear. So we're working with partners to develop the Internet of Things technology to be able to put the sensors that we need to really be able to understand some of the changes and hear Mother Nature in terms of what's going on within the watershed. But as part of that work of increasing biodiversity and focusing on investments in the watershed itself, we've been able to work on 25,000 acres, you know, as small as a baseball diamond to areas larger than probably our three smallest cities combined. So we work with 35 partners, and this is part of our public education and engagement, because when they're out there planting trees with us and understanding the water quality needs, we can also educate about how the choices that they make matters every day to the utility. And we even link it to things like, please, under the COVID industry, don't put anything other than toilet paper in the sewer system. You know, we were able to amplify and leverage this education wing that we have out there. Because we do believe once people are connected to nature and they're connected to the choices that they make, whether they're a homeowner or a business, then it helps them to understand what we collectively need to do together to be able to ensure that the natural environment is protected, as well as our ability to prosper as an economy with the business needs that we have. And it's also about partnering with our industries to challenge them to also begin thinking about the circular economy. And the way we've been doing that is to work through our, what we call our source control or our pretreatment programs, to really showcase the great environmental work that they're doing in resource recovery and conservation and those types of things. So it's really synergizing them, and it's really amazing that we have folks that come from Asia just to pick up our beautiful pre-treatment award that is given out. And, but it's really the focus. It's really synergizing people that are working in this space that's really sort of created some interesting things for clean water services. And I could go on about Fern Hill and some of these other things, but I just wanted to kind of put a down on it.
I do love the reference to Mother Nature. You've been a really good proponent for that message, for people to think about how we can replicate what happened before us and how do we do it in a manner that's going to be beneficial to the environment. So thank you for your story. Renee, we'd love to hear from you. You have a little bit different perspective that we want to hear to talk about what's happening in the Philippines.
Well, Cindy, if you've been to Metro Manila, you will know that we have millions of families, very poor families, who are called informal settlers. They don't even have toilets. When we took over from government, we took over only with, they gave us only one wastewater treatment plant. Today, we already have 41, which means we built 40 wastewater treatment plants. Very recently, we started operation for the largest, most modern wastewater treatment plant in the Philippines. Now, so we now have the capacity to treat water. How do we get the wastewater to them? And if you're talking of informal settlers, poor households, they are not going to spend money to bring wastewater into your sewer lines, nor are we going to be able to lay enough sewer lines in those areas. So what we did was we combined drainage and wastewaters. Now, I was talking about engagement. We had to engage communities to allow us to do that. We had to explain to them why you just can't throw wastewater wherever you want to, right? We had to convince them, allow us to build these interceptor canals, which hopefully, which will intercept all this before hitting the waterways. So that's one side of the equation. I wanted to go full circle. Having built 40 wastewater treatment plants, we now produce a lot more biosolids than we've ever done. And nobody will volunteer. In time was when nobody wanted that to be brought to his backyard, right? I mean, I don't want those biosolids here. But you know, we had a volcano that erupted, Mount Pinatubo, and covered thousands and thousands of hectares with lahar, in which nothing would grow. So we had to talk to the poor farmers again and said, hey, we have something here which will help you grow crops again. And so from the time when nobody wanted biosolids, now they're asking for it. Maybe someday I can sell some of it. But the idea is people now want it because it's been proven. And I wanted to use that as an example because that brings us to the whole topic of the circular economy, right? Phosphorus recovery from the BNR. So the idea for us has been, we have a very difficult situation where people don't have the luxury of resources, or the realities on the ground are very, very challenging. So we've had to find technology, and we've had to engage with stakeholders to adopt these technologies to better use. We continue to do that. We're building in our most beautiful island in Boracay. We've finally gotten the wastewater system running, biosolids being produced. We used to spend a lot of money to ship the biosolids all the way from Boracay to the volcano site, which is in the northern island of Luzon. But fortunately for us, just in the past 2 years, we've finally convinced the farmers very near to the Boracay Island to start accepting and using it because it's going to be cheaper, better for them to use this other than straight out fertilizer. These are the kind of regenerative or circular motions we're trying to do, which we are, again, sorry to belabor the point, we just need to sell the idea, get the stakeholders engaged, because not too many people want to pay the extra money to do this whole thing. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. And thank you to all three of you. Hopefully, people picked up in the audience that these stories align really, really well with your responses as to the priorities, the critical factors for successful implementation. And great examples of what it needs to educate. So making sure our stakeholders are educated and understand. And that happens through the partnerships. I think there's great examples from all of you how we can partner more broadly across our communities. And as part of that partnerships, we can achieve a lot more education and see that value that then comes to everyone by looking at that resource recovery. And then also it's the technology, right? The opportunities to bring forward new technologies that are going to allow us to be able to implement resource recovery and do it in a much more sustainable manner. And we continue to evolve and seeing that way that we can manage together and looking more broadly than just singular systems, being able to see how they all connect together. So great stories from everybody of working out with, whether it's other industries or whether it's with the community, and how we can partner to get to a really much more sustainable and resilient facilities. And probably, as noted by Diane, getting back to closer to replicating Mother Nature and getting those value propositions of why we want to do that. So I'm going to open us up for some questions, because we're getting quite a few that are coming in. And so one of the ones that people really want to hear an answer to is, how realistic is it to implement circular economy in local water utilities where consumers as end users are highly affected with its costs? So it gets back to that playoff. Is it, money versus planet Earth is another way to look at that, and what really would be a motivation to a community to say, yeah, I think this is the right thing to do. So I don't know, I'll see which one of you wants to put your hand up and I can see who wants to answer. Renee?
I was waiting for that question because the world is not the same. You ladies and gentlemen in first world developed countries have a lot more luxury when it comes to this than we do in developing or in countries where the demographic challenge is more significant. Every customer I talk to will say, I want my water as cheap as possible, and I don't care about what happens to the water after. I don't even care what happens to the watershed where you got it or where the water comes from. I think that challenge is probably true for many other countries or many other cities in the world. Fortunately for us, our regulator allowed us socialized pricing. So we charge the big consumers or the large industries more than we charge the ordinary poor household. Socialized pricing allows us to do cross subsidies across. And the idea is, you consume more water, you produce more wastewater, you should probably pay a lot more than the others, and you can afford to. But this has been the model for the past, 24, 22 plus years of Manila Water and ongoing. But we're seeing this beginning to evolve now. As the country begins to prosper and the middle income group becomes stronger and growing, I think there's a greater awareness to it. The other thing I'd mention is the next generation is greener than those of us who have been here longer. My own children are a lot more aware of these things than they used to. And, my daughter shouts at me if I'm ever going to use a plastic straw because of the turtles and stuff like that. But I am hoping that as education and as orientations shift and the realities of sustainability is more, and I'm sorry to use the word painful, then people will adapt. 10 years ago, when we were talking about drought and water recycling, nobody cared. But today, when there is water shortage, everybody cares. Everybody listens. When we say, hey, we can't violate this, or the dams have been the way they are, it's just that there's a lot more people and we're consuming a lot more water, so there's not enough for everybody. So we better start conserving. And when the faucet runs dry, that's a very powerful educational opportunity and an awareness opportunity for all of us.
Thank you, Renee. I really appreciate those comments, and good to bring into the perspective of developing countries. And Diane, I was hoping that you could also address that and maybe add in a little bit of conversation on how utilities convince stakeholders to embark on the circular economy. And really, as you're thinking about the cost, but also it's what's in it for them, right? Why?
Clean water services, the story is sort of interesting because by investing in these strategies, we've been able to lower the cost point for the utilities. So not only was it smart to invest this way from an economic standpoint, it was the smart thing to do for the environment. So right now, Clean Water Services has the lowest rates in the state of Oregon, the highest level of technology deployed because of the river that we return our effluent to, but also because of these strategies that we are doing to invest. I think we have to think about how you're deploying the investments and the strategies also differently. So for instance, utilities around the country, because you're selling bond measures or you're getting grants, you tend to build overcapacity in the systems. And that way of thinking doesn't allow you to be agile, to take on new technology and to incrementally invest. So Clean Water Services got onto a whole different investment strategy as we manage capacity and investments throughout the utility. But I also think it's a false choice that we're setting up with our mindsets that we can't be sustainable. It's going to cost more. I think together as an industry, we need to look for those strategies where it is both practical and pragmatic and simply the right thing to invest in. So part of this is education, right? So it's the fundamental education of our scientists, our technologists, and our engineers of the future. So my journey began 37 years ago as a student at Cornell University, and there was a game-changing professor there. His name was Bart Conta, and he has since passed away. So this journey of opening up the mind to these sustainable solutions began even 37 years ago in our educational processes, but we haven't really amplified it or taught the pathways because we focused on, I guess, our free body diagrams. We always sort of send the arrow off the page that says it's treated, and it really isn't treated anymore. You have to, what Bart said is you have to put the whole picture back together again. So you may have the system you're working on, but you have to see how it's nested in all of the other systems. Because at that point, it begins opening up different choices. So it is a way of thinking, it's different ways of investing. It is finding different regulatory processes that enable it. It's finding different financing strategies that enable it. But I don't want to diminish the significant issue that the developing countries have to get the investments in the gray infrastructure. So our focus is on gray infrastructure, green infrastructure, and the natural systems. And how do we synergize all three of those together to develop on both stormwater and wastewater services for the region? Because in our case, we see that we want to achieve, clean water to drink, fishable, swimmable waters. In order to accomplish that, it has to be just more than the solutions that are within the fence line of the utility. We have to venture out and look for solutions that are, and partnerships that are beyond the fence line to find those economical strategies.
Great. Qiming, I was wondering if you could talk about setting strategies and then having confidence on the ROIs that you're going to have. So one of the questions in here is, are we confident in the models we use? And I think Diane made a great point of sometimes it's a false mindset of saying that it's going to cost more, but we still also are looking at implementing new technologies. There is a cost to implement, and then really having a good feel of, can we get the return? And maybe that return is somewhat financial, that it's going to make sense to do it, but also having that return for the environment, that this is the right thing to do. So can you talk a little bit about that from PUB's standpoint?
Yeah, so from our perspective, right, many of these reuse projects that we have embarked on will have an economic case. So for example, based on the example that I shared earlier on the coal digestion of food waste and sewage sludge, we are actually generating more biogas that allows us to actually offset the energy consumption of our wastewater treatment plants. So in the longer term, we see such projects as key to allow us to not only offset our costs, but to also make ourselves more resilient to possible disruptions in maybe things like of our supply chain. If we were to able to recover, let's say, a significant portion of our nutrients component from our sewage sludge, for example, we will be able to feed our local economy agricultural produce. So for example, we have our Singapore Food Agency with 30 by 30 goal. So this means that it intends to try to meet 30% of our local nutritional needs based on local produce by the year 2030. So this is quite an ambitious goal. And then how do we want to do that? It will have to come from within locally, how we source the kind of resources to try to build up the capacity to do this. So beyond the economics that is in play here, I think from the PUB's and Singapore perspectives, there's also the perspective of resilience that is sometimes constrained by our size. We have very limited access to a lot of materials that we have on a natural basis. And as a result, the concept of recycling and reuse is a powerful approach for us to try to meet some of these resource constraints.
Thank you very much. So another question that has come up is noting that downstream management of water resources is pretty mature, and is there a way to really engage upstream to start the circular resource management? So anybody have, we have about 4 minutes left, so we have a couple of quick answers on this one. I'd love to hear from you. Diane?
And that's a great question, right? For communities, it's sort of the age-old question of the investments that we all live downstream from someone else, and we need to be able to manage the water quality by partnering with the folks upstream. And I've been posed multiple questions like this over the years, and it's really about creating that backbone entity that you can have these broader conversations with and these opportunities. Within our basin, it's easier because the whole Tuolumne River Basin is constrained within the county. But we try to deploy the strategies that we've learned in bringing all of the partners to the table to more complicated issues, like on the Willamette River in our area, where we had to align a whole bunch of different interests and parties together. But it's really creating that backbone to be able to create collective impact. And it isn't something that happens in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It's really a journey. It isn't the destination. And it works when you've got the right people that want to do something together. And it has to be more than just a transactional partnership. If you do this, I'll pay you that. It has to be in a way that's transformational, that we're all trying to do this together. I talk to people, it's kind of like we're having a dinner and we're all bringing a piece of the dinner to the table. It's sort of a buffet we're creating together, but literally it is working and developing those partnerships. And it isn't easy because the first year you may get one. The next year you may get 2 or 3. It's really building and amplifying. And it takes time to get there, but the outcome is worth it when you can actually make that happen. And I think that's the issue that we give up too early and we don't try to amplify these partnerships. And I think that's really the story. We're in it for the long run. So for instance, our ROIs at our utilities long. If we can get 7 to 10 years, we're doing really great. If we can get 1 year to 2, that's an investment we need to make right away. But you know, it's really, we have to be in this for the long game is what my thought process would be on this question.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think, you know, as we're closing out, we have a minute left. I'd just like to say, one, thank you to all of you for your fantastic comments. And I think it is summed up with going back to that education and the need to have that education, how tightly it is held with the partnerships that you form, right? So that it's the community, as we mentioned earlier, nobody does this alone. It's a journey that has to have many, many players and stakeholders engaged with us on that journey, or it's not going to be successful. And I think it was a really important point that all of you made is it's a long journey. Right? It isn't a quick fix. It isn't something that we just flip a switch and we're there. But we need to go on the journey. It's the only way that we're going to get the resilience we need across the globe in all of our communities. And we need to be able to figure out how we reach across aisles, how we join hands with all of those within the community to be able to achieve that. We don't know exactly what the end game is. We don't know. We probably, as I think you mentioned earlier, we probably will never get to the destination because we'll keep moving it, because we'll keep seeing how there's more that we can do as we have more technology, as we have greater opportunity to educate, where we have greater partners, where we have people who have aha moments and go, wow, you know what we could do, which is really what comes with most of the stuff that you guys have and the great examples that you guys have brought forward. So thank you very much for your time today. The time goes by way too fast. There's so many other things that we could talk about. But since we are at the end of the hour, I am going to turn it back over to Ryan.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for the panelists for taking the time. As Cindy, you mentioned, yes, this is indeed a long journey, and it's a complex issue, and certainly just having 1 hour is not doing enough justice. So I think the plan moving forward, Cindy, with your agreement, is that we will work together with Black Veatch to organize more future webinars on this complex issue of circular economy and resource management. And continue the dialogue in the coming months as we ramp up towards SIWW next year in June. So once again, thank you so much, Cindy, for taking the time off to moderate the panel and for sharing your perspective, as well as to our panelists, Renee, Diane, and Chiming, for taking the time to share their experiences with us as well. So before everyone goes off, we would like you to help us complete a simple post-webinar survey, again via the SparkUp application. So if you are still on the SparkUp app, we will launch the post-webinar survey, and please take about a few seconds to just complete this survey. Your feedback would help us improve our future webinars. So with that, we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you for spending your morning with us, and have a wonderful day ahead. Goodbye.